For 23 years, Deacon Whitmore carried the label of family disappointment. He watched his brother Quentin bask in the spotlight and receive every privilege, while Deacon himself remained in the shadows. But a fateful moment arrived in a Harvard University auditorium when his father officially bequeathed the family's $75 million logistics empire to Quentin, the family's golden boy. A stranger, with just a few words, turned Deacon's life upside down. They don't know who your real father is. The contents of the folder placed in Deacon's hands didn't just alter his destiny, they shattered the world he knew. At 28 years old, just 3 weeks prior, he had been merely the forgotten son of the Whitmore dynasty, owners of a prominent shipping company. The Whitmore name was synonymous with portraits in museums, lavish generational summer homes, and money that could solve any problem. Deacon, however, was the one problem the family couldn't fix. Vivian Whitmore, Deacon's mother, was 52, a woman who adored her reflection and was accustomed to admiring glances. She organized charity galas with military precision, leaving no detail to chance. At social events, she'd introduce Deacon as our other son, as if he were a minor detail to be mentioned for tax purposes. Her diamonds were worth a fortune, but her heart, when it came to Deacon, was cheaper than costume jewelry. Sterling Whitmore, the man Deacon had believed was his father for 23 years, built his shipping empire on capital inherited from his own father and the sweat of other people. At 55, he sported silver hair, which he claimed was from the stress of growing the business, not from the problems Deacon caused him, though he'd often make pointed jokes about it at dinner parties. Sterling knew the hull number of every vessel in his fleet, but couldn't recall Deacon's position on his high school baseball team. Deacon had been the starting pitcher, and the team made it to the state championship. His father never noticed. Quentin, Deacon's older brother, was 2 years his senior, a 30-year-old Harvard Business School graduate whom his parents considered a divine gift to the shipping industry. Perfect Quentin, with his flawless grades, prestigious internships, and an ability to overshadow Deacon with his mere presence. He didn't even have to try to be the favorite. He was born for it, raised for it, lauded for it. Every commendation, every trophy, every acceptance letter was framed like religious artifacts in their Connecticut mansion. But such is the plight of the forgotten son. He learns to observe, to listen, and to see what others try to hide. Like how his mother's smile never reached her eyes when she looked at his father. How his father's jaw would clench whenever someone mentioned children resembling their parents. How Quentin's confidence was as fragile as blown glass, ready to shatter at the first real challenge. Graduation day at Harvard was meant to be Quentin's triumph, the day he would officially become the heir to Whitmore Shipping International. Burgundy banners fluttered above every archway, a brass band played tunes older than the buildings themselves, and hundreds of the elite gathered to watch their progeny receive their golden tickets to the upper echelons of society. Deacon arrived in his beat-up 2015 Ford F-150, its bumper dented, its radio picking up only AM stations. He parked between a Lamborghini and a Bentley, likely belonging to kids younger than him. His suit was off the rack, the same one he wore to every family event where his presence was required but unwanted. Navy blue, unremarkable, just like him, in the eyes of those who mattered. The usher double-checked his invitation, as if disbelieving a Whitmore would arrive alone and out of uniform. He escorted Deacon to a seat in the back row, so far from the stage he could barely make out the podium. His parents, of course, were in the front row, in seats reserved for families who donated entire buildings, not just tuition. His mother wore a St. John's suit that cost more than Deacon made in 6 months working in the warehouse. His father's cufflinks gleamed like tiny stars, each worth a monthly car payment. The car payment felt like a premonition. I should have left then, recognizing the event not just as a graduation, but as the public demolition of my last hope for family validation. But I stayed, clinging to a naive, stubborn belief that I would be remembered. That spark could ignite into a flame, and Nadira Castellano was carrying the match, moving through the crowd. Nadira Castellano moved through the hall with the confidence of someone who owned the place. In her hands was a folder, ready to expose 23 years of lies. I didn't know it then. I was just Deacon Whitmore, the useless son, watching my brother's triumph, unaware that everything I believed about myself was a carefully constructed deception. The truth was worth more than the entire Whitmore fortune. The ceremony was about to begin, and it would be the last ceremony where I'd be called a Whitmore. Frankly, I was looking forward to the moment they realized their mistake. Growing up a Whitmore meant living in Quentin's shadow, but that shadow was as bright as Times Square, lit by constant celebrations and praise. Our Connecticut estate, 40 acres of manicured land, was divided into two wings, like two different worlds. The east wing belonged to Quentin, a sanctuary of accomplishments with display cases full of trophies, awards, and photos with senators, CEOs, and even a former president. The West Wing was mine, adorned with participation certificates and team photos where I was barely visible in the back row. "Quentin, show Uncle Harrison your Harvard acceptance letter," Mother would invariably say at family gatherings, adjusting his collar as if he were an exhibit. Her diamond rings sparkled, showering the room with iridescent glints that seemed to bypass me. Then she'd cast a glance my way, a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Deacon's still finding himself. Some people just need more time, right?" Uncle Harrison would nod, but his gaze held pity, like for a three-legged dog trying to keep up with the pack. He'd clap me on the shoulder and slip me a 20, as if I were 12, not 28, likely seeing it as an act of kindness to the family's black sheep. I worked at one of the family's warehouses in Newark, not in a prestigious role, but as a foreman, loading trucks, managing inventory, and mediating conflicts among the workers. My alarm rang at 4:30 a.m., and I'd drive in the dark to make my 6,000 a.m. shift. My hands bore calluses no makeup could hide, and I knew every forklift operator, dock worker, and trucker by name. "Why are you embarrassing us?" my father asked one dinner, looking at my hands as if they were contagious. He noticed the grime under my nails that wouldn't wash away. "Your brother is graduating from Harvard Business School, and you're content being a common laborer." "Someone has to know how real business works," I replied, cutting my steak with unnecessary force. "Trucks don't load themselves, and workers don't manage themselves. Let others deal with their own difficulties." Quentin let out a chuckle, imbued with the confidence of a man who never doubted his own importance. Adjusting the Rolex on his wrist, a gift from father for getting into prestigious Harvard, he ensured its gold bracelet caught the candlelight. "That's the point of hiring staff, brother. A leader doesn't get his hands dirty. He needs strategic vision, the ability to see the big picture." I couldn't resist. "But how can you see the big picture if you've never understood the details?" The clink of a fork hitting a plate sounded like a judge's gavel. "Deacon, please don't spoil our dinner with your warehouse wisdom. Quentin's professors claim he has the most outstanding strategic mind in his entire cohort." Of course they did. His professors had lauded him since preschool, when he managed to make a careless blob on paper that Mother saw as resembling a Monet. Meanwhile, I could assemble and disassemble a diesel engine blindfolded, but that talent earned no place in the family's Hall of Fame. The invitation to the graduation gala arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by courier service, like a subpoena. The envelope was weighty, heavier than all my monthly bills combined, made of paper that felt like a cross between silk and currency. Inside, embossed in gold, was lettering that probably cost more than most wedding budgets. "The Whitmore family has the honor of inviting you to share in the joy of Quentin Sterling Whitmore's graduation from Harvard Business School." My name wasn't even listed among the hosts, but was humbly lost among the myriad of invited guests, as if I were a distant relative rather than a brother. I stood within the walls of the Newark warehouse, surrounded by the real mechanisms that powered our family's fortune, clutching that invitation. Eddie, one of the forklift operators, solicitously asked if I was okay. "Family matters," I replied, and he nodded knowingly, like someone who understood that family ties could inflict wounds deeper than any industrial accident. The truth was, in this very warehouse, I had learned more about business than Quentin had in his ivory tower classrooms. I knew that Jose's daughter needed urgent surgery, and despite our insurance, he couldn't afford it. I knew Williams had been sober for 8 years, but still attended AA meetings every Thursday. I knew that when the cooling system broke down in July, productivity dropped by a full 30%. Not because people were lazy, but because the human body isn't designed to work in 104-degree heat. These weren't abstract case studies, academic research, or theoretical models. These were real people with real problems, directly impacting a real business. But none of it mattered to Sterling and Vivian on Whitmore. In their eyes, I was merely toiling in the dirt, while Quentin was preparing to inherit an empire built on the very dirt I was too proud to wash from my fingertips. The Harvard graduation hall buzzed with that peculiar energy that only arises when hundreds of wealthy families gather to celebrate the successful completion of their investments. The building itself was a monument to old money, with mahogany panels that had witnessed generations of American elite receive their expensive diplomas. I found my seat in one of the back rows, behind 300 other guests who apparently mattered more than a second sun. In the event program, I was listed simply as family member, while my parents' names and titles were printed in full, as if they belonged to royalty. The ceremony dragged on endlessly, replete with Latin phrases whose meaning remained lost on most attendees, yet everyone pretended to appreciate them. Honorary degrees were bestowed upon billionaires who likely hadn't opened a book since their last appearance on a bestseller list. Finally, after what felt like unending hours of self-congratulation, Quentin ascended the stage. Mother even rose from her seat and began to applaud, the light glinting off her Cartier bracelet. Father's chest swelled with a pride I'd only ever seen when he closed multi-million-dollar deals. The dean shook Quentin's hand as if greeting a future president of the country. And why not? In their world, money and power were inseparable, and Quentin was about to receive both. After the formal ceremony, guests moved to a lavish ballroom for the continued celebration. Eyes were drawn upward to crystal chandeliers sparkling beneath Renaissance-style ceiling frescoes. Waiters in pristine white gloves glided elegantly through the room, offering champagne, a single bottle of which likely exceeded a typical monthly car payment. Deacon, glass in hand, retreated to a corner to observe. Quentin, like a seasoned politician, circulated among the guests, accepting congratulations with a casual grace honed by years of practice. Suddenly, the clink of Sterling Whitmore's glass against a gold-handled microphone cut through the din like a bell. Sterling didn't need to command attention. His presence alone demanded it. "Ladies and gentlemen, a moment of your time, please," he began, his voice carrying the authority of a man never interrupted. "Today, we celebrate not just my son's graduation from Harvard, though that in itself is worthy of celebration." A polite ripple of laughter passed through the room. His mother stood beside him, her hand resting on his, a gesture that seemed supportive, but might have merely helped her keep her balance after a few glasses of champagne. "Today, we speak of the future," Father continued, his voice growing more assured. "Of the future of Whitmore Shipping International, a company my father built from nothing and which I expanded into a $75 million enterprise." Deacon's stomach clenched. He'd anticipated this moment, but the public announcement felt like a slow-motion car crash. "It is with immense pleasure that I announce Quentin will inherit everything." He paused, sweeping his gaze across the crowd, but never meeting Deacon's eyes. "The company, our collection of 12 rare automobiles, including a 1965 Ferrari once owned by Steve McQueen, our Manhattan penthouse overlooking Central Park, the Hampton summer home, and of course the Connecticut estate where both boys grew up." Both boys, that's how he referred to them. Quentin, by name, Deacon, as an afterthought, to the future CEO of Whitmore Shipping International. Father raised his glass, and the room erupted in applause. Business associates rushed to shake Quentin's hand. Mother kissed his cheek, leaving a lipstick mark which she immediately wiped away with her thumb. A maternal gesture Deacon had seen 1,000 times but never experienced himself. Photographers captured the moment for the social pages, camera flashes creating a strobe effect, as if everything happening was unreal. Deacon stood apart, invisible, with a glass of champagne that suddenly tasted like battery acid mixed with disappointment. "Nothing." The word escaped Deacon's lips in a whisper. 23 years of loyalty, effort, attempts, and he received nothing. At that moment, he saw her. She moved through the crowd with such determination that everyone else seemed frozen. A dark blue dress, elegant yet understated, silver hair pulled back in a style that suggested she had more important things to do than worry about fashion. Her green eyes met Deacon's across the room, and she headed straight for him, like a homing missile seeking its target. The crowd seemed to part before her, as if by instinct. There was such power emanating from her that people instinctively made way, as they would for someone carrying something dangerous. She stopped directly in front of Deacon, close enough for him to smell her perfume. Expensive, but not overpowering. "Deacon Whitmore?" she asked. "Yes," Deacon replied, surprised this stranger knew his name when half the room likely didn't. She placed a thick, heavy paper folder into his hands with a deliberate gesture, as if it were more than just documents. The folder felt weighty, full of hidden secrets. "Your mother has lied to you for 23 years, she said, her voice carrying a faint accent, perhaps Spanish or Italian. "They don't know who your real father is." "What are you talking about?" Deacon's voice trembled slightly, the champagne glass shaking in his other hand. She leaned closer, her green eyes locked on his. "Open it when you're alone. Everything you thought you knew about yourself is wrong. Your true legacy awaits you not here, in this room full of peacocks pretending to be eagles. It awaits you in Miami." "Who are you?" Deacon managed to ask, but she was already turning away. "The one who waited 23 years to deliver this folder," she replied over her shoulder. "Your real family says hello." Then she vanished into the crowd as quickly as she had appeared, leaving Deacon standing with a folder in his hands that seemed to hold either his damnation or his salvation. That evening, the festive atmosphere enveloped me from all sides. Quentin, like a seasoned politician, casually posed for commemorative photos with the dean himself. My mother, the socialite, enthusiastically recounted grand renovation plans for their prestigious Hampton summer home to another group of listeners. My father, surrounded by his loyal golf buddies, animatedly discussed the latest stock market trends and investment portfolio prospects. I stood apart, as always unnoticed, but now in my hands was a key that could make them see me in an entirely new light. Without losing a second, I left the hypocritical reception, bypassing the valet station where young attendants in scarlet jackets skillfully juggled keys to cars worth more than many homes. My old Ford F-150, with its peeling paint and rust spots, stood out against the gleaming Bentleys, Ferraris, and Mercedes, like a rough working finger among manicured aristocratic hands. Climbing into my trusty truck, I locked the doors and flicked on the dim dome light, which blinked twice before settling into a steady glow, enough for reading. My hands trembled with anticipation as I opened the fateful folder. The first document was a genetic test result, dated 2001. The yellowed paper held words that seared into my memory. The probability of paternity between Sterling Whitmore and Deacon is 0%, not 99.9% certainty, but an absolute absence of any connection. The man who had expressed his disappointment in me for 23 years wasn't even my biological parent. The next page made my heart skip a beat. In a photograph taken on a sunny Miami beach, my mother looked young and happy, a way I'd never seen her. Beside her stood a man in whom I recognized my own reflection, only 20 years older. The same dark eyes, strong jaw, and broad shoulders that had always set me apart from Quentin's leaner build. The man gently embraced my mother's waist, and she looked at him with a tenderness she had never shown Sterling. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, was written, "Vivian and Rodrigo, Miami Beach, 2000. Turning the page, I saw an official document from the Miami-Dade County Probate Court. Rodrigo Castellano, an influential Cuban-American shipping magnate, had passed away 3 months prior. In his will, properly executed and notarized, a section was highlighted in yellow, "To my biological son Deacon, whom I was not permitted to meet but watched from afar, I bequeath my entire estate, including Castellano International Holdings, all associated real estate and personal assets, totaling approximately $400 million. $400 million. I reread the figure several times, disbelieving my eyes. A common warehouse worker, barely making ends meet, had become the heir to almost $500 million. But the last page broke me completely. It was a letter, written in my mother's hand. The same elegant script she used to sign dismissive notes to my teachers and cold birthday cards, only with her name, devoid of any love or tenderness. "Rodrigo, Sterling must never know about that night. He's sterile after that college racing accident, but he doesn't know it yet. The doctors told me privately when we were trying to conceive. I'm pregnant with your child, but this child will be raised a Whitmore. The Whitmore name opens doors your money never could. Do not try to contact me again. Your money is nothing compared to the social standing Sterling provides. The child will have everything that matters, Vivian. Everything that matters. Apparently that didn't include the truth, or a father who actually wanted me. At that moment, my phone rang. My mother's ringtone, a classical piece she considered a mark of refined taste, broke the silence. I stared at her name on the screen for a few seconds before answering. "Where are you?" she demanded, her voice laced with annoyance. "Your father is about to give his second toast. It's rude to leave during your brother's celebration." "He's not my father," I said quietly, each word measured and filled with bitterness. Silence hung in the air, and I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard a faint whisper. "What did you say?" "Miami Beach, 2000, Rodrigo Castellano. Does that ring a bell, Mother?" I tried to keep my voice even, though my heart was pounding so hard I thought she could hear it through the phone. "Or should I just read you this letter, where you admit Sterling is sterile?" The line went dead. She had hung up, 23 years of lies, and she wouldn't even grant me an explanation. The revelation settled. He sat in the truck's cab for another 10 minutes, his gaze fixed on the documents scattered across the passenger seat. His entire past life, it seemed, had been built on a shaky foundation of lies and deceit. Now, every dismissive gesture from Sterling took on new meaning, as if some part of him had always sensed Deacon's foreignness. Even his mother's cold stares, once interpreted as mere disappointment, now appeared as veiled guilt. She, it seemed, looked at him every day and saw not just a son, but a living reminder of her secret sin, of the mistake she made to preserve her social standing. But Rodrigo Castellano knew the truth. He knew and patiently waited for his moment. He had tirelessly built an empire that easily eclipsed all the Whitmore's efforts, and now he intended to pass it on to the son he had been forbidden to acknowledge for so long. Right there, in that parking lot, surrounded by the cars of people who seemed never to doubt their place in the sun, he made an irreversible decision. He pointed his truck straight for Logan Airport. The engine, strained by the speed, whined plaintively but kept going, as it always did. At the United Airlines counter, he bought a one-way ticket to Miami, using the emergency credit card he'd carefully saved for a real emergency. And if realizing your entire life was a lie wasn't such an emergency, what possibly could be? "Any bags to check?" the agent asked. "No," he replied. "I'm leaving everything behind." She gave him a puzzled look, but printed the boarding pass nonetheless. Gate 23, departing in 2 hours. He had no change of clothes beyond what he was wearing, no clear plan beyond finding out who this Rodrigo Castellano truly was. He had no idea what awaited him in Miami, other than the truth that had been hidden from him for 23 years. While he waited at the boarding gate, his phone exploded with incoming messages and calls. 17 missed calls from his mother, 12 from Sterling. Message after message from Quentin, full of confusion and anger. "Where are you? Mom's hysterical. Dad's yelling at everyone. What have you done?" He decisively turned off his phone and boarded the plane. For the first time in his life, he wasn't running from something, but towards something. Towards a father who wanted to acknowledge him, towards an inheritance that was rightfully his, towards a truth that threatened to shatter the carefully constructed world of the Whitmores. The flight attendant offered him a drink. "Champagne," he replied, recalling that bitter glass at Harvard. "I'm celebrating." "What's the occasion?" she asked with a strained smile. "I just found out who I really am." The Castellano International Holdings building, towering in downtown Miami, made Whitmore Shipping seem like nothing more than a child's lemonade stand. 40 stories of black glass and steel soared skyward, reflecting clouds and capturing sunlight as if gathering energy from the heavens. The lobby alone could easily house the entire Whitmore Shipping headquarters, with its marble floors polished to such a sheen that he saw his nervous reflection as he walked across them. Guards in suits, likely costing more than his truck, nodded at his approach, as if expecting him. Nadira Castellano met him in the 40th floor boardroom. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Biscayne Bay, where massive cargo ships entered and exited the port like participants in an intricate choreographed dance. She initially stood with her back to him, watching the ships, then turned with the same purposeful grace he remembered from Harvard. "I'm your aunt," she simply stated, as if delivering a weather report. "Rodrigo was my brother." She gestured to a leather chair that probably cost more than he earned in a month. He sat, trying to comprehend that this elegant woman was his family, his real family. She brought up a presentation on a wall-mounted screen that seemed to materialize from the black wall. Your father built a shipping empire that makes the Whitmores look like small-time operators. We move cargo through all major ports, from Miami to Rio de Janeiro. Castellano International has contracts with governments, not just corporations. We don't just ship goods, we move economies. The numbers on the screen made his head spin. Billions in annual revenue, a fleet size that dwarfed the Whitmore's boutique operation, political connections reaching the White House and beyond. The company is valued at $400 million in liquid assets alone, she continued, flipping through slides of properties, ships, and subsidiaries. But the real value is in the contracts and connections. Your father spent 23 years creating something that couldn't be ignored or dismissed, just like his son. His knees felt weak. $400 million. And that's just the starting point. She handed him another folder. This one was leather-bound, with his name engraved in gold letters. Rodrigo knew about you from the beginning. Your mother thought she was clever, but Rodrigo had his own DNA test done when you were just 2 years old. A strand of your hair from a barbershop, if you can believe it. He watched you your entire life. Deacon's life changed dramatically after meeting Nadira. She presented surveillance evidence that both shocked and warmed his heart. Photographs from various periods of his life, from prom night to Christmas dinner at the Whitmore estate, testified to a secret concern and watchful eye. Deacon was stunned to realize that someone had carefully followed his life, capturing moments he himself hadn't fully appreciated. Nadira explained why Rodrigo hadn't contacted him sooner. Deacon's mother had threatened to destroy him, using her connections and political influence to hinder his business. But Rodrigo, a shrewd man, learned of Sterling's sterility through a private investigator who gained access to medical records. A shocking truth about Quentin's parentage was also revealed. He, too, was not Sterling's son. Deacon's mother had an affair with Sterling's business partner, Harrison Vale, 2 years before Deacon's birth. This explained why Quentin always received all the privileges and why Vivian had to keep Sterling in the dark, lest he start doubting his paternity. Uncle Harrison, who had always shown particular attention to Quentin, was his real father. Nadira presented legal documents revealing the Whitmore's fortune's dependence on contracts with Castellano International. It turned out that 70% of their shipping routes and 80% of their international contracts passed through Castellano's companies. Each contract contained a clause allowing for termination if the company was not managed by a biological Whitmore. Since Quentin was not one, upon his assumption of the CEO role, Castellano International could terminate all contracts, leading to the collapse of Whitmore Shipping within months. At that moment, Deacon's phone began to buzz with messages from Quentin, who was in a panic over his father's breakdown and his mother's seclusion. Nadira offered Deacon the documents to sign, making him CEO of Castellano International, his rightful inheritance. Deacon recalled all the years he was considered worthless, while Quentin was praised simply for existing. He remembered Sterling's dismissive treatment, the back rows at Harvard, and the unjust disinheritance. Without hesitation, Deacon signed his name, Deacon Castellano. After signing the documents, Nadira handed Deacon a letter from Rodrigo, written shortly before his death. In the letter, his father confessed that he had waited his whole life for this moment, observing Deacon's character being forged in difficult circumstances, while Quentin developed an ego at Harvard. Rodrigo expressed regret for his absence, but assured Deacon that he had provided everything that was rightfully his. Blood doesn't make family, but it makes heirs. Welcome home, your real father, Rodrigo, the letter concluded. The words, D. Rodrigo, were seared into Deacon's memory, as if carved in stone. He reread them again and again, absorbing every letter, every stroke of the pen that reflected the storm of emotions raging in the author's soul. This stranger, a man he had never met, proved to be more of a father after his death than Sterling had been in leave. 3 weeks later, Deacon stood in his new office, which offered a breathtaking view of Miami Harbor. Castellano ships bustled to and fro like pieces on a chessboard he now controlled. The morning sun painted the water in golden hues, and the company logo proudly adorned everything from massive container ships to trucks loading at the docks. At that moment, a professional knock echoed at the door, a sound Deacon wasn't yet accustomed to, still surprised he even had a secretary. "Mr. Castellano, your visitors are here." "I've been expecting them. Send them in." Sterling and Vivian Whitmore entered the office, looking as if they had aged a decade in those 3 weeks. Vivian's impeccable makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes, and Sterling's silver hair seemed even thinner than before. His commanding aura had deflated like a balloon slowly losing air. They froze in the office, struck by the luxury and power that emanated from the space. Deacon saw the dawning realization in their eyes. Their son, their failure, their eternal disappointment, now held their fate in his hands. "Deacon," Sterling began, his voice broken as never before. "We need those contracts." "No," Deacon simply replied, turning from the window to face them. "You need those contracts. I need nothing more from you." Vivian's unshakable composure finally cracked like expensive porcelain shattering on concrete. "I did what I thought was best. The Whitmore name meant everything. You must understand the opportunities it provided, the doors it opened. It meant everything to you. For me, it meant only pain, rejection, and 23 years of being told I wasn't good enough for a name that wasn't even mine to begin with." "Please," Sterling pleaded. Deacon had never seen him so humbled in his life. "Quentin knows nothing about this. He doesn't deserve to lose everything because of our mistakes." Deacon pondered for a moment, weighing the pros and cons. Quentin, despite his golden child status, had never been intentionally cruel. He was feckless, spoiled, and at times dismissive, but not malicious. He too was a victim in his own way, raised on lies just like Deacon himself. "I'll make you a deal," Deacon said, walking to his desk and sitting in the chair, asserting his new authority. "I'll maintain the contracts for 1 year. During that time, Quentin will have to work in your warehouses, real work, loading trucks, managing inventory, learning the business from the ground up. No special treatment, no privileges, no fast-tracking. He'll punch a clock like everyone else. If he lasts the entire year, doesn't quit, if he truly understands how this business operates, I'll extend the contracts. If he quits or you try to help him, I'll terminate everything immediately." They exchanged glances. In that silent dialogue, all 28 years of their marriage and the realization of inevitable defeat were reflected. "He won't last a month," Sterling said quietly. "Then you'd better hope he inherited more than just eyes from Harrison Vale," Deacon replied, watching the last shards of truth wound them. Vivian gasped in astonishment. "You know about Harrison?" "I know everything. Rodrigo was a very thorough man. Did you think you were the only ones who could keep secrets? But the difference is, Rodrigo's secrets set me free, and your secrets kept everyone captive." They had no choice but to agree to his terms. Turning to leave, Vivian paused at the door. "Do you hate us?" she asked without turning around. "No," Deacon answered honestly. "Hate would mean you still have power over me. You're just strangers who happened to raise me." Deacon last saw Quentin in work clothes, an intern patch on his pocket, standing in the same Newark warehouse where Deacon himself had spent 3 years. His soft hands were already blistering from the hard labor, and his shirt collar was soaked with sweat. But for the first time in his life, Quentin looked at him with something akin to respect, perhaps even understanding. "You knew, didn't you?" he asked during their lunch break, sitting on the same loading dock where Deacon once ate with Eddie and the other guys. "You knew all along you'd win in the end." "No," Deacon admitted, handing him a bottle of water. "I just knew it was better to be called useless than to actually be useless. Every insult, every slight, every time they lauded you while ignoring me, it all built something they never expected. Strength, real strength. Not the kind you buy with money or inherit with a name." Quentin nodded slowly, looking at his blistered hands. "Maybe it's my turn to build something now." "Maybe." There are truths that are undeniable, and Nadira was right about one of them. Blood ties determine inheritance, but they don't make a family. The Whitmores lavishly bestowed upon Quentin material wealth, high social standing, hypocritical praise, and a lie that became his eternal burden. In contrast, Rodrigo Castellano, a man he was never destined to meet, left behind something far greater. He gave him truth, a sense of purpose, and the certainty that he was waited for, watched over, and believed in, even when everyone else doubted. The former warehouse foreman, once deemed good for nothing, now managed one of America's largest shipping empires. The golden boy, conversely, toiled on a loading dock, learning the true cost of sweat equity. The parents, who had presumed to be the arbiters of their children's destinies, faced an inexorable karma that always collects with interest. Sometimes, the most valuable inheritance isn't what you're given, but who you become when you're stripped of everything. Every act of neglect transforms into a source of strength, every rejection into a catalyst for action. And every moment they tried to diminish you becomes fuel for a flame that will ultimately burn down their world of lies. He kept that same folder that had turned his life upside down. Every morning, sitting in his Miami office and watching the rising sun paint the Atlantic Ocean in golden hues, he reread Rodrigo's letter, not for the money or the power, but for the 5 words he had waited 23 years to hear. "Welcome home, my real son." Those words meant far more than $400 million, more than 40 stories of glass and steel. They meant that somewhere there was a soul who saw his worth when everyone else deemed him useless. Someone believed in him when he was taught not to believe in himself. Someone loved him enough to wait, to watch, and to do everything possible for the truth to prevail. The Whitmores taught him to survive neglect, and Rodrigo Castellano ensured he would thrive because of it. And that is the greatest inheritance of all, the realization that the family who rejects you simply makes space for the family waiting to embrace you.